Now, homographs are words that are spelled the same. They look the same, but depending on how they are pronounced and how they are used, could have different meanings. So with homographs, pronunciation is important. If we think back to our roots that we talked about in the first lesson, graph is a common root that means to write. So to help you determine the difference between homophone, which phone means to hear, sound. Homophones sound alike. Homographs are written or look alike. So that's how you tell the difference between the two. Now, let's see if we can determine the definition of each word based on how it is pronounced. In our first example, we have bow. All right, so we have our long O sound, bow. What is a bow? Well, if we look at our definitions, we see archery equipment right here. So archery equipment, if we think of archery, if any fans of Green Arrow, using a bow and arrow, that would be the definition of bow. Now, what about over here? We have, looks the same, it looks like bow, but it's pronounced bow. All right, what does it mean to bow? Well, bow can have a couple of different definitions that could come to mind. If I have anybody who is into sailing, for example, knows the parts of a ship, the front part of the ship is known as the bow. But bowing could also refer to the show of respect that we see in some countries where we bow, we bend at the waist. So in this case, bend at the waist is the definition of bow. Entrance. All right, what is an entrance? Well, if we go through an entrance, we're going through a doorway into a room. So entrance is a doorway. Now our other word here looks just like it, but it is pronounced entrance. So entrance is a doorway. What does it mean to entrance? Well, if somebody is entranced, that means that they're focused on something. Or if we are speaking to someone and we have them entranced, that means they're focused. We have their attention. So entrance means to hold one's attention. Console. Now, console, for my gamers, one of the first things that would come to mind is you would think maybe, PlayStation console or Xbox console. But in our instance, we're referring to a cabinet, a console cabinet. So, this pronunciation, console, refers to the cabinet. Our next example is console. All right, in this case, we're not talking about a cabinet. To console someone means that we are trying to ease their grief. We're being compassionate towards them, being loving towards them, because maybe they're going through a hard time, or they could have, possibly a death in the family, and we are coming around them to try to console them, to help them work through that grief. So ease someone's grief is the definition of console. Buffet. No, I'm not referring to Jimmy Buffett. If there are fans of him out there, in this case, we're not going to be singing Margaritaville. But the word buffet, what does that mean? Well, right now we have two options left, but anytime that we buffet someone, that means that we are striking them. Okay, so if we hit someone, that means that we are buffeting them. So, buffet means strike. And then finally, buffet. We should know that word very well. If we've gone to Golden Corral or gone to Shoney's or gone to a Chinese restaurant, we are very familiar with what a buffet is. That is a self-serve meal. So again, we have to be cautious when we are reading or even writing, and make sure that we are using the correct word to get our meaning across, to convey the information that we're trying to put out there. Now, of course, spelling wouldn't be an issue in these cases, but especially when you're reading, we have to be very careful to make sure that as we read over these words, pay attention to how it's being used so that we know which definition is in use in that particular passage or sentence. The last category that we're going to talk about are homonyms. To help us understand how they kind of take qualities of homophones and homographs, let's take a look at a couple of examples. So here we have bear, which could mean the animal, or it could mean to withstand or hold up. So if you're going through a hard time, you're bearing that hard time. You're bearing those challenges. So depending on how the word is used in the sentence will determine the meaning. Can or can. Okay? Can could refer to a metal container like a soda can or a soup can. But it can also mean that we're able to do something. You know, I can pick these weights up. Again, we have to pay attention to how it's used in the sentence to determine the meaning. Before we go through some examples together of identifying homophones, homonyms, and homographs, let's consider a few things as we close out the lesson. First, we've already pointed out that homonyms can create some problems when we're reading, especially if we are skimming through a passage. You know, sometimes we will come across a word like entrance, for example. You know, as we skim across it, we could think entrance and think doorway, and then after we're done skimming, well, what in the world did the doorway have to do with the crowd paying attention to a speech? So we need to be especially careful and pay attention to how the word is used so that we know which definition is correct. We can actually hurt our overall comprehension if we're not paying attention to how these words are used. Also, it never hurts when you're reading. If you come across a word and you can't quite make out what the author is trying to say, to check for alternate definitions of the word. So, if you have access to a dictionary, great. If not, there are plenty of apps that are available on your mobile devices that will allow you to access those words to help you determine which definition is being used. That way we know the information that the author is trying to convey to you.